Hello everyone, welcome to week 2 of our Cube League. Today we are in our round 2, my round 1 really, of the league matches, and we're playing against Big Hat Logan. Big Hat Logan I know is on kind of a blue-red tempo list. My hand looks good though. I'm on the draw, but that should be okay. I've got Preordain, Truth or Tale, Think Twice, and Kari Zev, so if I can stick this Kari Zev, I've got a decent amount of gas to kind of find me more threats or more interaction, so I'm pretty content with this hand. Alright, opponent leads off with Steam Vents, untapped. So I can only guess they're going to like Brainstorm or something else at the end of the turn. I'll lead off with Preordain. And Condescend looks pretty appealing. I'm trying to put this land on the bottom, I think. Or I'm thinking about it. Because here's the thing, I got 2 more cantrips. I should be able to find a land. I don't want to flood out. Alright, so I think that for now it's probably okay to keep that mountain there because it's also a second red source, which is kind of important, so I'll let that stay. Yeah, it's just kind of like, My opponent opts at the end of the turn, by the way. Yeah. So, next turn, obviously, I'm going to play the Kari Zev. I could wait on it if I, think about playing around counter magic. But I've got a lot of gas to pull me out of that if it is countered. I mean, it's still going to suck if it's countered, and it looks like it's going to be. But I think I'm punished more for not playing my 2-drop on turn 2 in this matchup. Yeah, but you know how had we been on the play, we would have been able to resolve that. So there's a stark difference between being on the play and on the draw. Right, opponent plays Shimmer Possibility. And for those of you watching who maybe don't know much about my cube or my cube philosophy, I am on a lot of cantrips. I think they're significantly better than your 3-mana draw spells, your 4-mana draw spells like Fact or Fiction. The reason that I believe this is because you don't see any of those cards played in the Eternal formats, which are playing the most powerful spells you can, right? You only see these kind of cantrip spells, and the reason is obviously it's tied to Xerox theory. That was a great draw, by the way, Vendilion Click. So I'm going to do that in his draw step probably. Yeah, I think that's correct, just to do it in his draw step. I don't see any reason that I would do it at a different point in his turn. Opponent lets it resolve. I'm going to target them. This hand is atrocious for us. So he's got Heinware Garrison. He's got Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Firebolt, and then 2 cantrips and a land. So he can play the Jace's turn. He can play Heinware Garrison plus Firebolt and kill my thing. So what I want to prevent him from doing is doing 2 things this turn. So if I take away the Heinware Garrison, he can only play the Jace or play the Firebolt. I mean, he can still play the Firebolt in like Telling Time, but he can only play like one thing that I care about. I don't really care about him casting a cantrip, right? So I'm leaning toward taking the Heinware Garrison because I also can't deal with it. You see my hand; I don't have any way of getting rid of that. Yeah, so I'm going to get rid of that hindmoor garrison. I accidentally clicked out of the Jace the Mind Sculptor. Uh, so, whoops. But we know it's there, and it's very likely he'll play it, if not this turn, next turn. Yeah, so his options are kind of like bounce the Vendilion Clique, which isn't ideal. I think he's just going to Firebolt it, and then next turn cast a Jace. Yep. He drew the miscalc off the top. That I wasn't expecting. Uh, yeah, that's probably a good game. Like, I had played the PN Quran there for the hope of being able to pressure the Jace, but yeah, that's probably a good game. Also, I could have just held up Condescend for the Jace. I'm not sure. I think it may have been a misplay to play out the PN Quran, just a little too aggressive. Alright, so he's plus 2ing. Likely to put it out of bolt range. Even though I don't have a bolt in my hand. But he doesn't know that. Targeting himself. So this way he can draw a better card if the thing heal it doesn't like is on top. Because he's not in full control here, and it's really smart to actually target yourself here. It's probably a mode that a lot of players don't use or underutilize. Big yikes. I mean, I guess I can play my own Jace. I don't find that play particularly exciting. Just because I don't know that it's really going to move me toward winning here. But, you know, I'm upticking Jace to be out of bolt range. And because I think racing to ult is maybe the only way that I can beat this other Jace. Because I think my ult is slightly faster. But I also have to be able to get something out of his deck, right? So I need to be able to get something that can either deal with that Jace or win the game. Oh, I know what I can get. I can get Jace Wielder Mysteries. So if I get the Jace, then it makes it very hard for him to actually to use the Jace ult to beat me. So my goal is to grab Jace Wielder Mysteries out of his deck, which I know is in there because I spectated his matches last week. So I can go for that, and that should allow me to win the game, potentially. Of course, that's barring any burn spell from him to remove counters from my Jace. If that happens, it's kind of screwed. And he should be able to find that with his Jace. Okay. Small Jace in addition. Alright, so I'm going to down tick here because now there's a little bit too much to deal with. These cards are pretty good, though, that I have to give to my opponent. Not 100% sure what he'll give me. We've got Gadwick, Retrofitter Foundry, and Bulk. I think Island's fine. I'm not like particularly interested in it, though. I have enough lands. So he'll probably divide it like land, Foundry, and then Gadwick on the other side. Hmm. I'll take the Foundry and the land here. Um, the reason for that is because Foundry allows me to kind of cheaply play something, and then I can also dig for maybe some removal for this Jace. I'm going to try to cast something in response to the flip trigger on Jace. But given that I have Seal Fire, it may be a mistake for me to not have done this on my turn. I'll cast Truth or Tale in response. We need to hit 2 bolt effects. We hit 1, so we'll put Curator Mysteries. Let's see. Yeah, I like Hypnotic Sprite and Curator Mysteries together, and then Bone Crusher and everything else, because I want the Sprite ultimately. I think Sprite is probably my best bet at having something effective here. Shockingly, he doesn't want to give me the shock. But yeah, I mean, Hypnotic Sprite is really great in that it can counter a lot of things, and then it comes down as a 2/1 and, can do some damage. So I'm pretty happy to be able to play that. I think while that's still on the stack, I kind of want to play Worldly Council. Let me check my list really quick here. I have a Galvanic Blast. Incinerate would be castable had I not cast the Retrofitter Foundry here. So I'll just let the Telling Time resolve. Maybe I can find Galvanic Blast. I doubt it. I think I'm much more likely to find the wrong one. I'll find like Incinerate and be punished for playing the Retrofitter Foundry, just because I didn't count my mana. So that was definitely a misplay. I think that this game, in general, I've misplayed a fair amount of times. Piankaron probably shouldn't have played it then. That last turn was pretty big as well. I think those are really the only 2 major misplays, but yeah, I think that those were big enough misplays to warrant a loss here, and I think it's highly probable that I lose this game, given that my opponent has 2 resolved Jaces, both of which can kill me fairly quickly. My opponent plus 2ing Jace, and looks like kind of thinking about what they want to do, what's on top. Alright, so my opponent kind of rushed through the Jace trigger. I wanted to respond to the activation, so I'm going to have him rewind. Alright, well, there's the CO fire. So we were punished in the end for not playing at sorcery speed. You can chalk that to another misplay. Or rather, I guess, an extension of the same misplay. There's the Watery Grave after after we've already cast our Worldly Council, so that's great. Is there even anything in our deck that can dig us out of this? I don't even think so. It's like Legion War Boss. Yep, we're just going to play out the 2-1. And then I guess we'll make a 1-1 on our opponent's turn with Retrofitter Foundry if we don't have to counter something. Okay, Twin Bolt. Sure. I mean, I guess I can condescend that, but I don't know if that's correct to do or not. I can always make a token at the end of the turn. It's not like super good against either of these planeswalkers, but trying to see what else I have in my deck that can potentially pull me out of this. Got like Rekindling Phoenix is okay. Cavalier is okay. Sarkhan is pretty bad actually here. I mean, I guess he's fine because I can turn my Jace into a dragon and smack one of the planeswalkers. I don't know. Not terribly impressive. But I guess Sarkhan's probably my best bet just because it's so much faster. So yeah, you like smack down the Jace or whatever, and then the next turn you animate both and hit the other Jace. No, that's really unclear. It doesn't really matter which one you hit. You just hit the one that's closer to ult. But I think that I'm ready to concede. There's nothing to do there, and we're, you know, almost 24 minutes into the match, so we're halfway through our time. So I need to make sure I can win the next 2 games. So I'm going to bring in Counter Magic, Quench, Clash of Wills. I'm going to bring in Black, so I'm going to bring in Creeping Tar Pit. I'm going to bring in Bitter Blossom. On-Crop Crasher's okay. I'll bring in Piper the Storm, though, for sure. I don't think On-Crop's worth bringing in. So we're at 46. We're at 2 extra lands right now than what we ran in that game. So we'll cut Sarkhan. We'll just cut the beef. So we'll cut like Sarkhan. Maybe we cut Cavalier of Gales. Maybe not. I mean, it's pretty good. But so is Jace. So I'm leaning towards just cut Cavalier of Gales. We want to resolve like a turn 2 threat versus our opponent because they have a ton of counter magic. Jace does feel kind of weak. I can cut him just for not being like super proactive. Hypnotic Sprite's pretty good. I can cut Sebion for being like the worst cantrip if I wanted to add a different one, but I think it's maybe fine for now. Could like add in Hieroglyphic Illumination if I ever felt like I needed another cantrip. I don't really need one, but cut an island and a mountain when we get to the lands. So we're at 43 total right now. We could play 15 lands. It's kind of what I'm considering. And if I ran 15 lands, would I rather cut an island or a mountain? But I think we can run 14. Cut Phoenix, maybe. I don't know. Phoenix is probably better than Cavalier of Gales. Just because it's 1 mana cheaper. It is very, very hard to remove. I mean, you gotta have 2 removal spells, which, if we're really pressuring our opponent, they may have a hard time having. So, yeah, I like removing Cav there. Just a slim 4-mana curve, which also helps us run 14 lands more easily. Not that we had mana issues last game. I mean, other than actually just having too much of it. But I think that since we're down a cantrip, it's not a huge difference, but I think that 14 lands is, probably great for curving up to 4 mana. And we've got Watery Grave, Creeping Tar Pit, Badlands, Blackcleave Cliffs, Marsh Flats, Polluted Delta as our black sources. So we've got 6 sources of black. Okay, we're going to take the play. Oh look, Kari's up. This time on the play, and then we've got Legion Warboss 2 to follow up. So we've got a pretty aggressive hand here. I feel very confident that this should be able to overwhelm our opponent just for being so slim. And we have all of our colors, so this is like an instant keep for me. Alright, so our goal here when someone casts Portent is to move really fast through our first few phases so they forget. Just kidding, don't do that. It's bad sportsmanship. It's kind of a funny joke though. Especially when you announce it to your opponent. When you say, hey, I'm going to rush through my phases so you forget. Because then they won't forget. Then it's funny. Then you can do that. Is it a land? It would be super cool if a land's not. Alright, that's fine. Alright. Karizev. What I like about Karizev in this matchup is that it demands my opponent have exactly a lightning strike or a lightning bolt type effect. And that's not a guarantee. My opponent's very likely to have a shock. And when they don't have, we don't even have a red source here, so we're going to get away with a lot. And if we find the mana for the Legion Warboss, we just smack my opponent really hard. You hit very hard. Oh boy, we doing it. Go. Now we can choose, I can choose not to even cast the Legion Warboss here. I'll choose to play this untapped and hold up my Clash of Wills. I think that that's smarter, given the way that my game 1 went, where I was just punished for being overzealous. I think that it's fine here to not overcommit. If we're in a commanding lead, my opponent doesn't have a red source in sight, so they have no way of removing my Karizev. I do kind of want to try to resolve this Bitter Blossom, but my guess is my opponent has a counterspell up, so I'd rather just not do that. And if they do nothing, just cast like Truth or Tail at their end step. Supreme Will, sure. Another island, not a good sign for my opponent. I think you should have Nagging Thoughts first there, right? Because then maybe you find a red source and maybe you can deal with this. I don't know. Alright. Ben's a Twin Bolt, which could mean a couple things. One, he's got removal that he thinks is better. Or two, he doesn't think that card's very good. 3, he still doesn't have a red source. There's a lot of different reasons you could do that. Alright, so I'm going to put these in piles of click and everything else pretty much. So, yeah, click plus land and everything else. I don't expect my opponent to give me Vanilla and click. so I'm kind of leaning towards taking the... Oh, they did. But I actually want the land. Weirdly enough. So the land allows me to... the land allows me to play Bitter Blossom in coming turns and hold up counter magic. Or to cast my Piran Quran. It allows me to activate Creeping Tar Pit. So it does a lot of things here. If I activate the Creeping Tar Pit, I get in for 6 next turn. My opponent's at 5. And then an attack plus the Searing Spear is lethal. Or even just the Searing Spear plus the Avacyn's Judgment. So, yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. Also, what else? Okay, so Mu Yanling, that's kind of annoying. I'm going to try to counter that. So if I tap out to counter it, my opponent has to tap their Sunbaked Foundry, or whatever that card is called, Sunbaked Canyon, I think, maybe. So they lose a life. Now I have to kill that, which is kind of annoying. But this does give me a window to resolve Bitter Blossom. Alright. And we'll hit that with an Avacyn's Judgment. Your turn. Just gonna make my token so that I can make sure that it just saves time. Basically, I just clone the token then. Alright, Heimer Garrison. Alright, so we drew Condescend. I kind of just like Searing Spearing this guy. And then I can push damage, get in for another 3. You can't block it anyway right now, but he could block the 2-1, so he could block the bulk of the damage, which is not favorable for me. Yeah, this is the other line that I was considering. I didn't vocalize it because I was kind of in the tank. But, so you attack with both, and this is 4 damage to my opponent. And then next turn, when I attack, I can just... I've got the 1 plus the fairy, so it's 2. Plus the Creeping Tar Pit, which is lethal, or I have the 2 in the air plus the Searing Spear. So I've got some options. And Searing Spear hold up Quench, right? So it's not really in the air. It's got Menace, right? So, but anyway, the point is that I can set up lethal this way, which it's a riskier line, but I don't really care. Because you can't really attack with this Heimer Garrison anyway, because attacking means that I can get in with the monkey as well. Now I bet he's wishing he had that Twin Bolt, because it kills the Creeping Tar Pit, it can kill the monkey plus the fairy token if he wants. I don't think it was necessary to misplay, it looked like he didn't have red sources, yeah. That prompts a concession. I could honestly even see bringing in Glint Sleeve Siphoner, especially on the draw, where we're gonna want another more early threats. Okay, so if I bring that in, what am I cutting? Cutting Rekindling Phoenix. No, I don't think Borderland Marauder is good enough. Do I? I consider bringing it in, but I don't think it's quite there. It's like not worth really to bringing in P and Quran or leaving in P and Quran over Rekindling Phoenix just because it's more bodies, which is I guess it's more effective in that it's harder to it's harder to deal with with non-twin bolt effects because you have 3 bodies as opposed to just the 2. Um, it also is a little bit. It's not like a lot faster, but it's a little bit faster because you can sack this stuff. You can sack the Thopters and deal damage that way. Alright, so we drew Karizev again. So 3 opening hands with Karizev. Let's see if this game she's still as good as she was in the previous one. Our biggest hope is that our opponent taps out here, so we can just throw her into play and not care. Alternatively, we can wait for some lands and see what happens. Because if we go like Vendilion Click on our opponent's turn, and then try to resolve Karizev right after, that's like a really good line for us. And that's going to be possible. So I'm okay with just passing here. I don't see any reason to play one of my best threats, as was demonstrated in the last game, into open mana. Not whenever I can just cast my Vendilion Click and try to take away their 1 ability to remove Karizev and 2 take away their counter magic by forcing their hand a little bit. And that is, I mean, this is why Click is a pack 1, pick 1 for me. And I know I'm like, I'm probably a little bit biased just because it's blue. And I love playing blue decks. But this card is just a house. It's so good. Oh, look, a Valk. Okay, fetch for Steam Vents. Yeah, I think that the last game, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it does seem like my opponent's fixing is probably slightly worse than mine. I did pick my veggies pretty high in those packs, so, I ended up with, what was it, like 10? I think 10 sources total in my pool, which is pretty high. Not as high as Usman. We'll see if we play him next round or not. Just depends on who wins this one and who wins his match, but wow, that's a lot of removal you got over there, my friend. This is tough. Brazen Borrower. Let's take the Jace, because it's the only thing that's really scary out of that hand. I mean, removal is good, but in order for him to kill my Karizev, he's got to have double removal, and I can just counter the second one. So, I mean, that wouldn't be ideal for him. But, and he's also going to be probably wanting to kill my Vendilion Click. So, okay, he plays out the Young Pyromancer here. Yeah, and I don't care, I'll just swing. I'll hit you in the face for 3. I'm going to play the Karizev, of course, but oh, he's considering if he wants to Brazen Borrow my thing? Alright. I mean, that's fine. I'll quench that, yeah. Whoa. Cars outside my house being aggro. Alright, so my opponent missed their trigger for their Young Pyromancer. I'm just going to shock it um, before it can do anything. Now, it could have been incorrect to shock that because I have the Searing Spear, and Searing Spear is more mana efficient. So, like, whenever it comes down to something later and I want to have, like, a 1-mana spell, maybe that's a Flounder or something, and I end up losing because of that. I could see that happening. Alright, Magma Jet to kill my click. And that's really important, right? Because now my Kari Zev will be able to resolve and be very difficult for my opponent to answer. As we can see, they've only had shocks so far this game, so they've only been able to deal 2 damage. All right, I drew another land, so I'll play that out. I'm flooding a little bit here. That's honestly okay because I have the Creeping Tar Pit, so I do have a mana sink. Looks like... Okay, so they countered my Kari Zev. I'll just pay the 2. It's fine. Because again, I'm not terribly worried about... They have to have exactly a Lightning Bolt style effect where it deals 3. And they haven't shown me that they have that yet, so I'm not particularly concerned. Go ahead and search for Watery Grave. Yeah, it's a 4-drop I'm pretty happy to play. I'll attack. He'll probably block the monkey. Yeah. So he takes just 1 here. And then I can play the Pian Karan and hold up Mana Leak. I should have tapped for that differently, but that's okay. It's a minor misplay. I should have tapped the Shivan Reef and left the Volcanic Island untapped. I'm just going to move them so my brain doesn't... Because my brain just wants to like lump everything together, so it taps it all together. So I'm just going to... I think I should probably just switch those, yeah. Because I know better than that. That's like a pretty... It's not a big misplay, but it's like just a pretty rookie mistake. I have a lot of pressure my opponent has to be able to deal with here. The Deer Kraken, no. And he'll kill the Pian Kron, yeah. It's fine. Is this lethal? We got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus 3. It's not quite lethal. Trying to think of how to tap here. 1, 2. Alright, yeah, I'll play that out. Sure. Yeah, we'll just attack with everything. This puts him to 5. Means he's got to deal with virtually everything on my board. And then he still loses to the Creeping Tar Pit plus Searing Spear. Yeah, that's not going to cut it, my guy. Alright, we did it. We won in 3 against the mirror match. Yeah, so let's head into our round 2.
Okay, so headed into round 3. Unfortunately, my QuickTime player corrupted my file again, so I'm going to be recording in the replay screen, and I will show you my sideboard strategy in Tapped Out, which is where I've saved my deck list, so I'll go over the cards that I know I brought in, and kind of why I brought them in. So with that, let's head into the first game. And of course, we're playing against Usman Jamil, who's on 4-color mid range. Let's just fast forward to the hands. Um, so I choose to keep this hand. We've got Thassa's Intervention, Mana Leak, Vendilion Click, and Hypnotic Sprite, so I can cast everything but the Kari Zev. And the way I'm looking at it is that I do have several threats that I can play. I do have interaction that I can play, and so I should be able to slow down my opponent. Now, I'm looking at Usman's hand, and it looks like he had a one-lander that was off-color, and he couldn't cast Brainstorm or Sensor. So he's going to bin this hand. He was having mouse issues this night, so there's going to be some kind of weird things where he double draws and things like that. And all right. I didn't see what he binned there because of the speed, but he's going to cast a turn 1 Serum Visions. This hand is alright, right? He's got Grade Fixing, Spot Removal, and of course Liliana, who is kind of a pain. Alright, Seal of Fire is my draw. That's not exactly ideal. And so what's going through my head right now is that I am trying to find another land, but I also am missing a cantrip, so my agency here in terms of getting to that land is pretty slim. But I should be able to hit a third land by turn 3 here, considering I'm on the draw. And there we go. So now I can just play out this Kari Zev. But Usman, of course, has the swords. He can also just play Liliana in down tick if he wants. But it depends on what he can fetch with Scalding Tarn. So, his mana base isn't necessarily perfect, so it just kind of depends on how it's constructed. Of course, there's also the added benefit of being able to just uptick Liliana is really nice. It usually rings it out of range of burn spells to put it at 4. Oh, he should be at 17 here. That was actually a mistake that I didn't catch in game, but yeah, Usman should have gone to 17. I'm not sure if it makes a difference in this game, but those kinds of things you don't always see in game. Alright, so he's upticking. My guess is he bins Tarfire, and I'll probably bin... Alright, Thassa's Intervention is what I binned. I couldn't remember for sure, but in my brain I was thinking Mana Leak or Thassa's Intervention. And I was correct that he bins Starfire. And the reason that I'm okay with binning the interaction there is because I'm being forced into a place where I need to be somewhat proactive. And so I don't really need the counter magic as much as I do need things like Click and potentially Hypnotic Sprite. So that was kind of my thought process there. Alright, so Usman plays a land. What's really nice about this is that he's going to uptick Liliana, and in response, I am just going to cast Vendilion Click. I could have actually done the Live the Dream and gotten the Madness combo with Avacyn's Judgment here, but I think that just playing the Click so I can play my hasty 3/1 creature is relatively good. So when this forces Usman, he's going to play Secure the Waste in response, which I don't really care that much about, because then it's just I'm racing him. I started with a higher life total. Yeah, my life total's higher. We have the same amount of damage output a turn, so I should be able to win that. Although I guess technically because of the error, if I attack the Lily, then he swings back and we should be neutral, but I'd still be hitting him first in that exchange. Of course, he doesn't. That's not considering that I have the Avacyn's Judgment to kind of wipe away a lot of the board. It's not considering, the other factors of the game that would allow for me to potentially get more damage in. But yeah, so I'm actually targeting myself here and bidding the mana leak. And the reason for that is because I know he's going to discard his Day of Judgment anyway, so I don't care about that card. And I'll just bin the Curator Mysteries here. I think that it's just not necessary for me right now in this hand. Alright, Think Twice is a fine draw. So I hit Liliana down. Put her to 2. I'll probably Seal of Fire now. And then I can hold up Think Twice. Yep, so Seal of Fire. In this instance, just Sorcery Speed Shock. But just efficient removal, allowing me to not die to a Liliana. Ow. Alright. So yeah, end step, just gonna cycle. Alright, another land. It's not bad. I chose not to kill any of the soldiers there, or the warriors. Because again, I'm reading this situation as, well, we have the same amount of damage output per turn, but I'm hitting you first, so I will win this race, right? So it's the impetus is on you to actually do something to force my hand. This is the way that I'm looking at this. And because I put the mana leak back, I can't counter this. So my Vendilion Clique is going to die. It is kind of sad that Hypnotic Sprite doesn't have Flash. That'd be really nice. Legion Warboss is a great draw here, so I'll just go ahead and play that guy out. Yeah, kill off Chandra and kill a couple dudes, I guess. Nope, still not worth it. And I mean, I think that makes sense too, because he's gonna leave up a couple, maybe 1 or 2 of these guys to block. So being able to make the decision later is always better. Incinerate, just another Incinerar, actually. Incinerate makes 3 points of damage to the creature or player objectivo. So that's interesting. I'm refreshing my Spanish, so it's interesting to see that target player is objective player. So the words are a little bit different. But anyway, yeah, so we just swing. This is, at this point, I think that you guys can all follow along without me telling you. I turned the Legion Warboss sideways. I trust that that's understood. Banishing Light, nope. Hypnotic Sprite. That's pretty much the nail in the coffin. Usman kind of flooded out there at the end. Liliana took away a Tarfire, which could have killed this Legion Warboss. We're swinging for 6, and then we've got the Incinerate to put him to 1. Well, that would actually, with the fetch, he would have been dead here. So that does make an actual important distinction of like potentially having an extra turn. Can't remember if I played a land here. But yeah, I chose to take the Rekindling Phoenix just in case he's able to Wrath this board or something. But yeah, Lightning Strike is not going to do it. And he just will concede and just not show me that. So, alright. With that, let's head into our sideboard, which I have to go back to tapped out for. So, I come over here. One thing we notice is that Cavalier of Gales and Sarkhan both cost 5, right? That's the immediate thing that I boarded out in the other matchup as well. But I know that Usman has Day of Judgment, and I'm sure he's got at least one other Wrath in his deck. So I actually kind of like Sarkhan just because it can play around Wraths. And the same is true of Rekindling Phoenix. So I kind of like those two cards. I'm actually going to cut Pia and Karan and Cavalier of Gales here, just because I think that they're a little on this lower end, and they play weakly into Wraths. So I'm going to bring in the same kind of board strategy as before. I'm going to bring in Piper the Swarm and Bitter Blossom. And I'm going to cut those two. And I'm also going to bring in Hieroglyphic Illumination and Clash of Wills, and there's another counterspell in here too, Quench. So I bring in those 3 cards, and I'll cut probably Sea Beyond. The reason I want Hieroglyphic Illumination over Sea Beyond is that Sea Beyond is a sorcery, and it costs 2 mana. So whenever I have to cast Sea Beyond on my turn, that means that I don't get to cast a 2 mana counterspell. So I swap those 2 cantrips out so that I can have more instant speed cantrip capacity, so that I'm not necessarily having to cantrip on my turn and make those kinds of decisions where, oh, I chose to cantrip here and now I can't cast my counterspell. So I made that swap. Let's see what else. Where else did I find room for all these counterspells? I'm not exactly sure what else I cut out. It may have been something like maybe Avison's Judgment, which is like reasonably weak. I could have also just not brought in Quench and just only brought in the Clash of Wills. That part's not 100% clear to me. But I think that's my general sideboard strategy. And then I just brought in Creeping Tar Pit and what other fixing? Oh, Blackleaf Cliffs, and I swapped out a mountain and an island. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did, I think, here. So with that, let's just jump into the second game. Alright, so I've got Creeping Tar Pit, and 4 other lands, Truth or Tale, and Jace, and I like that hand. My opponent, Usman's got Tarfire, Safe Hold Elite. I should highlight these. Tarfire, Safe Hold Elite, and 2 6-drops. I would not have kept his hand, but maybe I keep this hand just because I've got good fixing, right? I've got all 5 of my colors or whatever, and I've also got early interaction in the form of Tarfire, and 2 of my best threats if I can get to 6. I drew a Quench. Alright, Usman drew Chain Lightning, so more removal, which is going to make me a sad boy. Alright, and I drew Click. So Click is really nice. That's a card that has been consistently overperforming, and that's the reason it was my pack 1 pick 1. It's because it is a card that consistently does that. And we're just going to kind of take some chip damage from this Safehold Elite. I'm not going to waste removal on this guy. Eventually, my creatures will just be bigger than this creature, and I don't really... It's guaranteed to 2 for 1 my removal, so I'm not really interested in trying to deal with that. So I'm going to cast Truth or Tale here. This is like a mini Fact or Fiction. So I make 2 piles, and then I hand them off to my opponent. And this pile is really interesting, so I'm going to pause here. The pile that I end up making here is going to be Sarkhan plus Blackcleave Cliffs, Curator of Mysteries, Polluted Delta, and Worldly Council. So either way, I have the option of a land that can help me activate Creeping Tar Pit, or I have the option of grabbing like a high value threat. And at this point in the game, I was not sure which one of those was more important. So I knew that I wanted Delta more than I wanted Blackcleave Cliffs, so I put Delta with the threat that I cared less about. So I put Delta with Curator of Mysteries, and I put Blackcleave Cliffs with the threat that I thought was better, which is Sarkhan, just to kind of see what would happen. Now, I think that I'm probably not going to get this pile of 3. Usually you get the pile of 2. And again, I'm okay with Cliffs here because it comes in untapped. I'm also okay with Sarkhan. So, but I think it kind of depends. Obviously, Usman still has to make his decision on what I get. But spoiler alert, I know what he gives me. And he gives me this pile on the right. And it's really close here, I think, because being able to activate Creeping Tar Pit early is really nice. I don't know about this Tarfire in his hand, so, but I think that I end up taking the Sarkhan, and I think that works out well because I have the appropriate amount of fixing already. I don't really need more lands. I will draw a black source at some point, so I'm like not particularly worried about that, even though 2 of my black sources are in this pile. Right, so, but I still have like 4 or 5 more in the deck, and I have a lot of potential to see those cards. And there's a hieroglyphic illumination, so, I'm just kind of slowly getting to that point of being able to draw the cards. Alright, so play Shivan Reef out, and on my opponent's draw step, I will cast Vendilion Click. This is probably going to eat a Tarfire, which ends up being really important for me, right? So the Vendilion Click is so great in that I get to now have a Tar Pit that has less instant speed reaction to hit it. And I know that Usman's not on a ton of interaction because game 1 he didn't have a lot of, or sorry, not a ton of instant speed reaction because game 1 he didn't have a ton of it. And there's just not a ton of it in Cube if you're running singleton cubes. So yeah, here, I guess I just want to put the Chain Lightning away because I want him to have less potential to remove stuff, specifically my Sarkhan. So when I resolve Sarkhan, I want him to survive. So I don't want him to be able to just like kill the Sarkhan with something, right? So yeah, and I don't know about, okay, I can't hide the Chain Lightning, but we know that's not there. So, but I'm going to keep this window open because it's important to know what I know my opponent has and how that differs from what I see my opponent having, right? So here I want to play this War Boss. And it's good that I played this land out first because my opponent couldn't censor it. And that was something that I was playing around because I knew that he had censor in his deck. So, and now he's going to cycle it to try to find something. And he did not find something. But actually, he and I were talking after the game, and I didn't think that he had like a ton of cantrips, but it looks like he's actually got a reasonable amount. He's got Serum Visions, Censor, Scour Possibilities, and we also saw in game 1 that he binned a hand that had Brainstorm in it. So he's got at least 3, which is a fair amount. Garrick Relentless. All right. So yeah, that's gonna eat my. It's gonna come down and eat my Legion War Boss, and I'm gonna be a little bit sad about that. And then my guess is I will cycle the Hieroglyphic Illumination because it's more mana efficient to do it that way, and because I want to find something to kill this Garrick with. Um, Rekindling Phoenix is pretty good here. He's gonna have exactly like exile removal, but I can also just jam Sarkhan, which is more mana efficient, and kind of protects me as well, since now his Safehold Elite can't attack into my 1/1 without trading. Um, so I rather like that, and then it also just invalidates the Garrick tokens. Unexpectedly absent. That's so bad. It's just so bad for me. I mean, I know that when I was playing this game, I was just like, um, when this card resolves and just takes away the dragon, so that now I just have to chump the Safehold Elite. Just such a big difference in terms of what my turn was gonna look like, right? So, and obviously because I can see hands and things like that, I get to react a little bit sooner. So, I don't know if that makes better viewing or worse viewing experience, but it does give me more time to talk, which I love to do. It is kind of awkward for Usman, actually, though, because he wants to cast these cantrips. So, being forced to cast Unexpectedly Absent here to answer my threat is kind of annoying for him, and I just have more and more threats. So, he just has to keep doing that over and over again throughout this game, which I think is kind of annoying for him. Wow, that's brave. I don't know if I could have done that. Like, you've got to see a white source in those top two. Of course, now we already know that he's going to see a white source in the top two because he gave it away. But yeah, that's pretty brave. But it might be a necessary risk, right? He's been stuck on 4 land for a little bit, and he really needs to get to Elspeth and Liliana to kind of seize control of this game. So yeah, I can see that. Hmm. At this point, the only things we know about in his hand, by the way, are Elspeth and Liliana, so I'll just cut that. It's just kind of in the way. We know that he's got 2/6 drops in hands. And that is important because we know that we don't have to hold up Quench until he has, more mana. Right now he's got 5, so, it's at a point where, maybe we want to start holding that up, but yeah, soft counters are really great whenever you're playing against um, higher costed things because quite often you don't hit as many lands as you think you're going to hit. So I'm going to fast forward through this a little bit because it's going quite slowly. So yeah, he bounces the dragon token. He's going to attack into my Sarkhan. I'm just going to chump with the goblin. I forgot that the wolf didn't have haste because it's kind of a long turn. And here you're going to play Gadwick, which is really nice. I'll go ahead and kill Garrick. Whoa, and he draws Banishing Light. Here he double drew. So, but there's a command to undo that draw and shuffle. So, unfortunately for him, because the process is always undo, draw, and shuffle, that means that he's not going to see that 6th land here, which he does really want to see. So, or at least
He's not. That's not his guaranteed draw next turn. Now I'm kind of. This is a play that I'm not 100% sure on. It's kind of a fancy play. I'm casting Quench here, despite the fact that I know it doesn't end. Um, it doesn't counter this Banishing Light, right? It just forces him to tap out, which is relevant because it means he can't cast his Serum Visions. But I didn't know about that. But I'm doing it because I want to tap down this Safe Hold Elite, which will help me get in combat damage next turn as I cast Jace. So I'm going to cast Jace minus. Is that right? Do I need to minus here? I actually might just plus, right? Because that basically prevents almost all damage to be dealt to Jace. If I find a land, though, yeah. If I find a land, I can cast Karizev. So, yeah, I like that. Alright, so I didn't cut the Avacyn's Judgment for what it's worth. Hand that over to him. Usman will probably divide this into land spells. Maybe not, though. I mean, give me both Incinerate and Avacyn's Judgment is also not ideal. He does know that I didn't play a land this turn. So I'm super happy to take the land plus the removal spell here if he gives me that pile. But Gadwick, the ability to tap things down is actually like quite often a playable mode, and it's one that I'm pretty consistently impressed with. So I do enjoy that gameplay of Gadwick. And I didn't need to cast him for like 5 or whatever here to draw cards. And I think that's like one of the big differences between this card and Muldrifter that is really important. Gadwick is a modal card with a lot of flexibility in gameplay. Okay, so it gives me Avacyn's Judgment and the land, and I'll take those two. That doesn't go to the graveyard. Incinerate should be on the bottom. There we go. So yeah, I'll just play Karizev, get in for 3, and we're just able to press some tempo advantage because we have a 3-drop in play. Whereas if we had Muldrifter, we would have had to tap out. We wouldn't have gotten to do. I mean, there's some pros and cons there, right? If we had Muldrifter, we would have had a 2/2 flyer and drawn 2 cards. We just wouldn't have held up, or we wouldn't have had Quench, or we wouldn't have used Quench in the way that we did. Maybe our opponent found a 6th land that way, but maybe we also just had Quench for the Elspeth / Liliana. So there's some trade-off there. But my Karizev, or my Jace is now dead because he killed Karizev with swords. Serum Visions. Did he scribe both to the bottom? I want to know. Nope, he kept them both on top. So I wonder what they were. I'm curious now. Liliana minus is so annoying here. But, I mean, I can come back and I can cast, like... Let's see. I've got 4 mana for Rekindling Phoenix, but I also know that he just Serum Visioned. He's probably likely to be able to cast one of those big threats next turn. So instead, I could just not cast Rekindling Phoenix. I could just cast Hypnotic Sprite, and that's a flying threat that can kill the Liliana. Or I can cast Avacyn's Judgment and kill the Liliana that way. Yeah, there were a lot of modes there, but I guess that this way works the best because then I don't have to discard another card, which granted my opponent doesn't have to discard one either. So there was the upside that if my opponent had to discard Liliana, Dreadhorde General, or Elspeth, and I just counter the other big one, that's not that bad for me. But yeah, I'm certainly holding up counter magic here for a 6-drop. I'm not gonna play my Rekindling Phoenix and just kind of YOLO into it. There's another unintentional extra draw, but it is really nice to see kind of what's in Usman's deck. Elspeth Knight Errant, obviously, very powerful card. And this match is pretty close, right? We're going back and forth a lot. There is this freaking Safehold Elite has done like 9 damage to me or something crazy like that. Maybe less, because I've taken some damage from the Shivan Reef. But, it's done a substantive amount of work in this game. So yeah, but I'm going to counter that with Thassa's Intervention. Love these modal cards. Alright, Gallop Blast. That's going to shorten the clock a little bit. So I'm going to play this Rekindling Phoenix. I know that the Elspeth is going to come down, but I don't care because I think my goal here is just to race my opponent. And I think I can do that okay, given my hand. And I might even just play the Hypnotic Sprite here if I'm not thinking that my opponent has removal. But I do kind of want to hold it up because he could have another O-Ring effect. I mean, I can't counter it right now, but he's not going to cast O-Ring right now. Like, in my brain, he's fully on Elspeth unless he's got an O-Ring. But even then, it's like, why would I not just cast the Elspeth most of the time? So there's a couple things, too, to consider here, right? Can I race Elspeth? Yes. Because I have 4. If I cast this next turn, I have another 6 in the air. So 4 plus 6, 10 plus Galvanic Blast. So it's a 2-turn clock, right? I get to lead off with Think Twice here instead, which is really nice. And I draw a Marsh Flats. So now I can just use this Creeping Tar Pit, which is even better. So I'll activate the Creeping Tar Pit, attack my opponent's face. I know it seems counterintuitive because a lot of the time you just want to kill the Elspeth, but putting my opponent to 4 here is so good because now he's got to be able to deal with the Rekindling Phoenix and the Tar Pit in order to not die. So I don't really care about 5 damage here. He's got to have something crazy, which I know there's no Bane Fires or whatever in my cube. And Grim Lavamancer is just not going to do it. So we end up getting here, but what's really important about that play is that being able to attack my opponent for 7 is a lot of damage. And this is one of the reasons I'm really impressed with Creeping Tar Pit as an addition, is that it does give these tempo decks a threat without necessarily having to commit a slot to the non-land side of the board, which is rather important. And it's also hard for tempo to kind of get a decent amount of threats. Additionally, they're just this and Colonnade are just really good in the control decks as well. For the same reason, it's hard to find enough dedicated slots. But they do really just help you pressure your opponent, pressure planeswalkers, things like that. Like if I were afraid of this Elspeth, I could have killed it last turn without much of a problem. So that's a really nice aspect. So just kind of hit for 7, and we had counter magic up to protect us here from some sort of removal spell. So anyway, with that, let's head into our closing thoughts.
All right, welcome to my TED Talk on tempo. Yeah, this essentially I'm just going to talk about tempo as an axis throughout this this talkback. And now I'm not talking about tempo, the archetype. I'm talking about tempo, the axis, meaning essentially how efficiently are you using your mana. That's a really brief synopsis, but I'm just going to kind of dig into that from there. If you want to read more on tempo, I highly recommend Patrick Chapin's Next Level Deck Building. I think it's a really valuable resource, and you can learn a lot from that text. That aside, tempo was really prevalent in all of my games, right? So in game 1 versus Big Hat Logan, essentially lost that game because he was able to answer my threats for equal or less mana than I spent on them. And in the case of Kari Zev, I lost a lot of tempo because he answered my threat, and I was forced to then try to dig to find another one, right? Because I just simply didn't have one. But in the case of like PN Kron, when I drew it, answering it for half the mana that I spent on it is a really big deal, and it allows him to then turn his turn into something really tempo positive by following up with like a Jace, which is really hard for me to answer. So in games 2 and 3, I slimmed down my curve, and I played cheaper things to kind of get around those counter spells and pressure my opponent more quickly, which, as you were able to see, that resulted in a victory because my opponent, unfortunately, Logan, was a little bit light on deal 3 damage type of removal spells, so Kari Zev was very hard for him to answer. And the way that I played that game also allowed me to kind of play around the double shock that could happen, right? On the flip side, against Usman, Usman drafted 4-color mid-range. He had 17 main deck dual lands. He ran no basics. And so his fixing was very good, but in spite of that, because it's 4 or 5 color-ish, I think he was on 4 colors actually in the main board. But because he was running 4 colors and it's singleton, your mana's not always perfect. And that mana, those mana imperfections really cost him in his games, right? So there were a lot of moments where he couldn't really cast a cantrip and hold up a counterspell, or where he wanted to cast a cantrip, but he also needed to cast a spell that cost double white, right? So like the unexpectedly absent turn. The reason I noted that as a big risk is because if he didn't hit a fetch land or whatever that could find a white source, then he was in a predicament where he had to wait a whole turn cycle with 2 4/4s in the air, just kind of beating him down. Had he drawn a Karplusan Forest, that game was much more in my favor. So yeah, I guess what I'm really saying here is that kind of cost him a lot of tempo efficiency simply because he wasn't able to spend as much mana as he had due to mana imperfections, right? Additionally, he had a curve that went up to 6, which is mid-range, can be kind of hard to get to, especially in games, or in game 2. I think he may have boarded out his Wraths. I'm not 100% sure on that. But if you're not able to use a Wrath to leverage that tempo back in your favor, where your opponent develops a board state, you clear that, and then you seize it with a bigger threat. He wasn't able to do that, whether it's just kind of deck order variance, or it's because, a decision he made to board those things out. I think that really made a big difference. You could see that those 6 drops lingered in his hand for the entirety of the game, and had they been 5 drops, maybe they helped him swing tempo back in his favor. But because I was continually pressuring him, continually spending my mana in a proactive way, he was forced to continually be on the back foot, responding to things rather than casting a cantrip to try to find another land or whatever, right? And that makes a really big difference in terms of how likely he is to be able to kind of wrest control back. So I think that one thing that I hear a lot about is, do you ever worry that in your cube, 4-color or 5-color controls can be just the most dominant thing in the world because you run so many planeswalkers, you run so many X-Spell that I think is really powerful. And I think that this was a really good demonstration of why I don't think that that's true. I think that whenever you have a very tempo positive environment, it forces those decks to be proactive, and they kind of struggle, and unless you have really great fixing and you're like maybe splashing 2 colors or something like that, it can be really challenging to actually cast all of your things in the appropriate manner and still be able to answer the board effectively. So I don't find that to be true. And this is, of course, reflective of my play preferences, my design preferences, and obviously, as cube designers, you can always curate in a different way. But in terms of representing why my cube is the way it is, I think these games really show kind of how important tempo is as an axis within my cube, and how much I try to kind of put proactivity at the forefront, so that control really needs to be built and piloted well in order to dominate games, rather than just kind of be the best deck. Same for, really grindy mid-range. And so with that said, keep cubing, keep curating, and keep learning. I think that I love getting to learn, and I love getting to cube in new ways. I don't always draft tempo as an archetype this time. And it's really interesting to see how that kind of is navigated in a different way from control or aggro. So, but thank you so much for watching, and there will be more Cube League content next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. So if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks.